Hey guys, welcome to Tokyo Creative Talk. I'm your host Shizuka Anderson, and today we're joined by a very special guest. This is Dogen, if you were not familiar, but he is a really major YouTube full-time content creator with over 40,000 subscribers and a very large following on Twitter as well. So we're very happy to have you here today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for coming to Kyushu.
No problem. Yeah, as you can see, we're not in the Tokyo Creative office at the moment. We came all the way to Kyushu. We're very happy to be here though. It's a beautiful place over here. So nice change of atmosphere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've been living out here for quite a long time.
I've been in Beppu, this city, for around 5 years now. Okay. And I was in a different part of Oita Ken before that for about 3 years in the JET program. So.
Nice.
Almost one of those 10-year in Japan foreigners. Not quite there yet, but I'll be there soon.
Almost. Yeah. When is your Japan anniversary?
That's a good line.
That's what I call it every year.
Let's see. I was kind of in between Japan and Korea for a little bit.
Yes,
so,
okay.
Yeah, it'll be either like at the end of this year or early next year.
Okay, cool.
Because I did a year in Tokyo.
And then it'll be 10 years. Like that's your 10-year...
10-year total, yeah.
Whoa, yeah. 10-year Japan anniversary. That's worth celebrating, actually.
Maybe I'll go to Tokyo and finally visit your guys' office.
Yes! Oh no, that would be so awesome. We have a great little setup going on. But, so when you first came to Japan, did you start out in Tokyo?
Yeah, so the first time I ever came to Japan, yes, was Tokyo. And then the first extended stay that wasn't like a week-long travel was that study abroad. So I did a year at one of the universities in Tokyo.
Oh, awesome. And then after that, did you feel like you wanted to live in Japan?
Yeah, that's, I think, a really interesting question, because I think a lot of people that study Japanese at university, how should I phrase this? Like, Japanese is a skill that it's kind of cool to have, but it's not, you can't make a lot of money off of just knowing Japanese. Like, you kind of have to know Japanese and something else, and another skill, that is.
Right.
And also, I think that it's quite difficult to use Japanese on a regular basis at a fairly normal advanced level, unless you're in Japan.
Right.
So for me, it was if I didn't go to Japan, it would be I'd kind of be starting back at zero in the States.
True. And
I didn't want to do that. And I do like living in Japan and the culture and everything. So yeah, right. I decided to come back on the JET program.
That's great. Okay, so you really wanted to use Japanese. That was kind of the first step, I guess, in your journey in Japan.
Yeah.
What actually kind of got you interested in Japanese culture that made you want to come study abroad here?
I think it was probably the first thing was martial arts. So I've always been really into martial arts. And then after that, I kind of got interested in Asian culture in general. And from there it was Japanese music, and just kind of turned into a weeaboo from there.
Really? Is that how would you actually call yourself?
Well, I don't know. I think to some degree, I think most people in that kind of sphere are more into anime, and I do anime, but I wouldn't say it was my the main reason I came to Japan. It was one of many reasons. So.
Okay, makes sense. But that's really cool. So you just you kind of started out doing martial arts, and that was kind of...
Yeah, I never trained formally in any martial arts, but I got into this sport called tricking, martial arts tricking, which is kind of a mix of martial arts and gymnastics and dancing. And
cool.
I did that from the beginning of high school until I graduated from university. That was my life. So
wow, really?
Yeah.
Was that popular in the US at the time?
No, it's become a lot more popular now, but that's actually the main reason that I started YouTube, is because when I began martial arts tricking, that it wasn't a big thing. You couldn't take classes or anything like that. So the way that everyone learned it, there was two types of tricksters. There was backyard tricksters like me, who never had any martial arts training, and then people who actually had formal training. So the backyard tricksters, the only way we could get better is by filming ourselves and then analyzing the clips. So all the tricksters, as a side product of tricking, learned how to video edit and stuff like that. So I started YouTube 2006, Like
yeah, you went
way
really
back in
way
the day.
back. Yeah.
Yeah, but then I was like only tricking videos until probably 2009, and then after that it was kind of like I did a few videos about like kind of my life in Japan when I was on the JET program, but it was more of like a hobby rather than like I want to get into YouTube full time, because
Right.
at that time I was more concentrated on writing. I wanted to pursue that rather than YouTube.
I see. Okay. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask about like what was the start of the whole, YouTube journey in the
Tricking,
channel.
yeah.
Cuz and so you were making videos like really early on. So like I think you also had the /user kind of link or like username. That's kind of like the original one. Now it's different. But you kind of just like really were like the start of the kind of YouTube scene, basically.
I was on early because all the tricksters sounds kind of weird saying, but when that started, tricking, everyone was struggling to find a place to host their videos because everyone was on the same forum. And so like one person would buy web space, and then like all the tricksters would like be like, please host my video so like other people in the community can see and we can like learn from each other and stuff like that. And so when YouTube came and anyone could upload a video anywhere, it like completely changed and the game for tricksters. So everyone that was tricking got into YouTube like super early. It's just they weren't doing like vlogging or anything like that.
Right. So it's kind of like a revolutionary thing for anyone who was doing that.
And then also as a byproduct of every trickster doing that, tricking by itself like exploded. So like it's an order of magnitude larger now than it is like when I was tricking. So like there used to be one kind of gathering called the Loop Kicks gathering, like down in San Jose, California. That was like the tricking event each year. Now there's like 50 events all over the world. So so it's completely different now.
Wow. So considering how like kind of niche it was at the time, how did you discover tricking? Like what because I didn't even know what that was until like really recently.
Well, do you know the film Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon? Yeah, so I saw that, and I think I had always been unconsciously like into Asian culture, and like I don't know, I liked like the architecture, and like I liked the way that like kanji looked and stuff like that. And then also martial arts, of course, but it was like I saw that and it like blew my mind how like beautiful and like amazing the choreography was. So like some of the moves that they were doing on that, I was like, I really want to learn how to do that. And so like I did a little bit of research online, it's like what kind of martial arts it was and like what the name of the move that they were doing was, and it's like it's called a butterfly. It's kind of weird.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And so like there's like a few videos like way back in the day. It's like this is how you do this technique, again hosted on like someone's own website, and so that's kind of how I got started doing that.
Cool. That's a really neat start. And then to consider that like your channel has changed so much since then, like you've had a huge like flip in terms of direction. When was it that you kind of started making videos in Japanese, actually?
Right. So this is funny. I tried to tell this story when Chris Broad came here, and I was so like bad with my phrasing that I'll try and tell it better this time. So when I was in university, I was completely into tricking again. It was like my whole life. It was that, and then like I was also into Japanese language. And during study abroad, I was like, it was my first time since my first year of high school where I said, okay, tricking is going to be on the back burner and I'm going to concentrate on Japanese during this period. So I got more into studying, and I was reading some like books and stuff in Japanese. And when I got back to the States, I took a class called Contemporary Japanese Literature. And I read one of the short stories in this book.
Oh, cool.
The short story is called Minku. And it's by Kanehara Hitomi. And again, I mentioned this in the video with Chris, but it's about a schizophrenic person. And so like the story basically changes every 2 or 3 pages, the narrator says, and actually that was just one of my like hallucinations. And this is what it's actually happening. And it blew my mind that something so creative could exist. And up until that point, I'd spent a good amount of time blogging, not vlogging.
Okay.
And I was always kind of looking for an outlet to kind of express myself, I guess, beyond just the tricking. So like I enjoyed writing in general, and I expressed that through blogging for a long time. But when I read that story, it blew my mind, and I was like, okay, I want to be a writer.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, and so I spent basically from that point forward, it was like tricking and writing until the end of university. And then after I graduated, kind of going back to where we were talking about at the beginning, but it was like, okay, I want to be a writer, but I can't write in English when my major is Japanese. It's like, conflict of interest. And so I said, okay, this is going to be like impossible, but I'll just try and write in Japanese. And so the entire time that I was in the JET program, I just spent basically all of my free time trying to write in Japanese.
Wow, good for you. So, that's really challenging.
Yeah, for the first, well, basically the entire time on the JET program, like everything that I wrote was pretty terrible.
It's hard starting out, I think.
Yeah. And also, I think one of the things that it took me a long time to figure out was that I think that I was more in love with the romantic idea of being a writer rather than like the actual craft of writing.
I see. Okay.
Not to sound too pretentious.
Right.
But once I showed something that I had written to a friend that was a graduate of like the bungakubu at Todai University.
Whoa.
So like really smart literature
Very prestigious.
guy. Yeah. And he was like, okay, you're trying way too hard and your writing is terrible. You might want to give up. And so when I got that feedback, it was much longer and more detailed though. And
like he gave you a detailed description
he was like, this
of
is what's wrong.
Why it's bad.
This is everything wrong with your writing.
Wow.
And so I was like, I almost was like, oh my God, like this is so depressing. But at the same time, it kind of encouraged me to try a different avenue. And I also had a similar experience in university. During the last year of university, I had a class where, so this is actually what I wanted to tell in the video before with Chris, but one of the last classes that I took in university, it was this creative writing class. And we had this assignment where the teacher said, okay, here's your prompt. A man walks into a business meeting. Now you have to write this and imagine that it's the first sentence of a story. So the first sentence of any book, story, novel, whatever it is, has to be impactful, right? Yeah. So it's like, it's a short homework assignment. It's just one sentence, but it's got to have significance, right? That particular sentence. And the trick was that you have to do it from 9 different perspectives. So it was like first person objective, first person emotionally involved, and then first person comical.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the second was like third person with each of those variations, and then the final one was third person omniscient. I see. Like they know what's going on. Yeah, right? With everything.
Yeah, they know everything. Almighty.
Yeah, exactly. So I had 9 different variations of one action basically. And the feedback that my teacher gave me was, you're bad at everything except comedy.
Oh.
And it was like the exact opposite of like the feedback I was expecting.
Yeah.
Because I was still in this mindset of like, okay, as long as I'm writing, I must be at least somewhat competent, when clearly I wasn't. But she said, when you're writing comedy, you're not trying as hard and it feels much more natural. So if you want to get into writing, you might want to try and pursue that avenue. And so when I got that feedback from my friend, after coming to Japan and starting to write in Japanese, it reminded me of that experience before. And I was like, okay, maybe I should try this comedy. And so I started writing less.
Serious.
Yeah, I stopped trying so hard to come across as someone that was smarter than I actually am. So, and I think that was like the best thing that I could ever do for my writing. It was just being much more natural and relaxing.
Oh,
and yeah, comedy was just, I guess, the one thing that I wasn't terrible at.
And then, well, I mean, that's kind of where we all start, or you're kind of finding like what it is that comes most naturally to you, I guess, and then kind of work on honing that craft essentially. And then so ever since then, you kind of thought, okay, so I'm going to pursue comedy. Did you try more comedic writing, like just writing, and then when did you transition into the videos?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, for those 3 years in the JET program, I was basically only writing. And towards the end of that, I had finished like a couple of short stories, like one short story in Japanese, and then like a collection of shorter stories as well. And the way that I wrote, I used this website called Language 8, where like natives will look at your writing and correct any mistakes that you make.
Cool. Wait,
Yeah.
this is like, so you write in Japanese and Japanese people will correct it. Like,
Yes. So it's kind of like Facebook, only like the
Cool.
social function is that you correct your friends' language. So like I would correct the English of Japanese speakers then.
that's a really neat website. I didn't know anything like that existed.
Yeah, I think it's called High Talk now.
Hey, so it's still around. People still are using it for that
Yeah.
purpose. That's really cool.
Yeah, and so I spent, again, basically the three years doing that to refine my skills. And I think by the end of that period, I finally got to a point where I could write by myself in a way that was just about acceptable in terms of like grammar and stuff like that. And at that point, it became like the prose, the words themselves became irrelevant, and everything revolved around the idea. And I figured out that for my specific type of writing, that the only thing that the only thing that matters is the idea, and you can use very, very, very simple grammar to express complicated ideas. And when that clicked, it was like, okay, I can do this. And so kind of self-published these stories online on Amazon, and they did like, I don't know, okay, I guess, not like great, not terrible, but I couldn't live off of them at all.
Right.
And I was still tricking a little bit and like editing videos in the meantime. Then I was like watching all these people around me get like really popular on YouTube, and I was like, well, do you know what rakugo is?
Yes.
Yeah, like
it's
sit
a
down
traditional,
storytelling.
Yes,
Yeah.
Japanese storytelling.
Yeah. It's like, I think it's called sit down comedy is the way that it's translated often. And I was like, well, what if I take like all these short stories that I have and I delivered them in like a rakugo style?
Hey,
Because
cool.
in my opinion, the overwhelming majority of people, young people in particular these days, they would much rather consume art in video form. So people are going to be much more likely to hop on YouTube and watch something than like actually buy a book.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, what if I take these same pieces that I created, like these, written pieces, and I just speak them? Like, would that be more popular? Could I gain popularity doing that? And so like all of the, I don't know, probably the first half year of videos that I did were all like the supermarket video, the butter video, probably about 10 or 15 videos. They were all just scripts, old scripts that I had written that I was just reading them off.
Oh, really?
So that's how I made the transition from writer to YouTube. So I've always been, for me, it's always been not about video, but about writing. And that's why I never change my setup. Like the only thing that changes each time is the script.
That is really interesting. Like I never would have, I mean, I can see now when you say rakugo, like how the style of your videos, it reflects the rakugo style. Like it's very, I haven't really watched a proper rakugo performance before, but
Me neither,
I've seen,
actually.
okay, yeah, but I can see how it's that, I don't know, kind of simple delivery and, relatable content. It's basically like really traditional Japanese stand-up in a way. Rakugo, I would say. So I can see how that's reflected in your videos, and it's really interesting, like basis or foundation of making.
Yeah, it wasn't where I expected to end up, but I think for me now it's kind of like I'm comfortable in the place that I am. I think it's going more or less okay.
Yeah, I know. I would say definitely more than okay. It's going really great. That's really cool. I think probably a lot of viewers as well might be surprised to know that that's like where it came from.
Yeah, I never really talk about that. I try and make basically my content only the content itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think any of my viewers would know that story.
Yeah, well, I mean, a little something for the fans, I guess. That's cool. And so speaking of the channel, one thing I think a lot of people probably haven't realized is that Dogen is not actually a real name.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
Well, it's a real name, but it's not my real name.
It's not your real name, yes.
Yeah.
But so the question is, where did it come from, and why did you choose this as kind of your YouTube handle, I guess?
Yeah. So again, when I was tricking back in the day, everyone that was tricking was on one tricking forum. And so this was in high school, and the name my real name, which we'll leave out, it was taken by another user.
I see. Okay.
And at the same time, I was reading a lot of books on Zen Buddhism. I was kind of like going on that Asian tangent, trying to learn more about Asia in general, in Japan. So Dogen is one of like the key figures in Japanese Zen Buddhism. So he was like, I don't know, the name that was in my head at the time. So I was like, okay, well, I can't use this. So I'll just go with Dogen. And it kind of just stuck.
Really? That's actually, so you were really into this learning about Japanese culture, and that was something you were quite, I don't know, kind of fascinated with at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow, okay, so Dogen, so it is actually a Japanese name. Like, I thought it sounded Japanese, but it is Japanese.
The name itself is Japanese. I'm not.
Right. And some people could be mistaken in a way. Like, your Japanese is very, very natural. Like, your pronunciation is, like, I think it could almost pass as, like, native or close to native.
I usually tell people that I can pass for native for about the first 5 minutes.
Oh, really?
So like in the first, like at the beginning stages of conversation where everything is like already decided, like, oh, nice to meet you, whatever, like on the phone and stuff like that. It's like, when you know everything that needs to be said, there's not as much pressure. But like if we start talking about like politics or something like that, it'll become very evident immediately that I'm not a native speaker. So.
Yeah, but that's definitely like a more advanced stage. Like it's even if you get like a very, if you have great fluency in Japanese, there's still another level, which is discussing really difficult topics.
Yeah.
And, politics is a hard one. You have the right vocabulary. I also struggle with that, even though I've been here for quite a while as well, but there's still certain things you just can't eloquently discuss in Japanese. Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe you found this too, being bilingual and brought up like with 2 languages, but it's like the better my Japanese gets, the worse my English gets, and vice versa.
Yes, same.
Yeah.
I totally relate with that.
Yeah, so I'm kind of, I don't know, it doesn't bother me that my Japanese isn't perfect, because for me the most important thing is, again, like the ideas in the videos. So it's like Japanese is more of like a tool, a means of expressing these ideas.
Right.
And I think that it gives it like a nice, unique twist. But again, it's like, definitely not perfect.
Right. And do you find that you want to improve more? Like, do you feel that also pronunciation is really important for you? Do you try to be careful about that, or did you work on that a lot? Yeah,
that's a great question. In university, I talk about this a little bit on like my phonetics series, but I took a linguistics class at the same time that I was taking a Japanese class, and I learned like you get significantly worse at your ability to acquire language over time it deteriorates as you get older, right? So we had like all these concrete studies that say, like, okay, after like 13, like you're screwed. You can never sound native or anything like that. And so I was like, okay, I got to like really like concentrate on speaking because my time is limited. And so I got completely into like the phonetics side of things, so speaking. And I learned like all these tricks about Japanese that you're never taught in the classroom. But if you know, it'll like fundamentally change the way that you speak the language. So here's a good example.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to know some tips if they're learning Japanese.
Okay, here's a good example. So pitch accent is a thing in Japanese. And I think people are basically aware that pitch accent is a thing, but they don't really know what pitch accent is and like how it affects words and stuff like that. But here's like the go-to example I always give. And this is like, again, something that I teach on Patreon separately. But okay, if we take a word like school or university, so 学校 or 大学, right? The typical native English speaker will say these words like 大学 or 学校, or they'll say like, 学生 instead of 学生. And they don't know that they're making a mistake because pitch accent isn't taught, right?
Very true. Yeah.
But almost, not every word, but almost every word in Japanese that has 2 kanji and 4 mora, so basically 4 syllables, kind of like, 4 beats.
Yeah.
That will follow this pattern where the first pitch is low and all the remaining pitch are high, and the particle that attaches to that is high as well. So like 大学に or 学校に or like 最高の or 残念 残念な or like the what do you say, the 例外?
Exceptions?
Yeah, the exceptions.
Yeah.
The exceptions to that would be like 挨拶.
Oh.
Like 挨拶 or like 経済. But like if you just memorize like the exceptions, you can assume that every word that follows that particular pattern or that falls into that structure will have that pattern, and immediately your Japanese improves by like a measurable degree.
Really?
So that's the kind of thing that I teach on. Yeah.
That's a really great tip though. Like that's some like really, really important, like I think that's something that people can benefit from so greatly.
Yeah, I think it's like almost like a crime that it's not taught in the classroom, because just by knowing like a few little tips like that, like your Japanese will sound like completely different. And like it's the difference between sounding like noticeably foreign and like more or less like competent, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think it also helps the impression that you leave.
Exactly,
for sure. So some people might think just because of your accent, like when speaking Japanese, that it affects your competency. Like, oh, they don't really understand Japanese, or we can't trust them with this kind of like task.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because I think that there's been so many times where I've heard stories about people like not being allowed like access to like a certain service or stuff like that, and I've basically never had trouble with anything like that in Japan. But I think there's also a trade-off, because I actually think that there's a fair amount of people who, well, how should I say this? If you have like X number of hours to study, you can do like half phonetics and half grammar, or like grammar and vocabulary and whatnot. But because I spent so much time on grammar, or not grammar, phonetics, it's like I think that for a very long time, and maybe not anymore, but my accent was so much better than my spoken Japanese that like the first, again, couple minutes of conversation, people would be like, oh, your Japanese is really good. And like 2 minutes in, they'd be like, why don't you understand what I'm saying when your accent is like pretty good? So that was like a weird hurdle that I ran into later on. But I kind of played catch up later on. So like during the JET program, I shifted from phonetics to vocabulary and grammar, because I figured that you can play catch up with those anytime, but when it comes to speaking, it's like if you create a bad habit, it's so difficult to fix later on.
Yeah. Oh, I can totally understand that. Also, I also have experience teaching English, so I can see the students who've kind of gotten set in their ways of pronunciation. It's very hard to set it back once you've like gone past certain time. So that's really great. I think that's a really nice series that you're providing for your viewers.
Yeah, it's basically I like to think of it as an acceptable incentive for people that might want to become a patron for what I do. It's like I don't want to just say give me money, like if you like my work. I want to be like, okay, if you want to support my stuff and you happen to be like studying Japanese, you'll get access to these on the side. So if you're interested, you can do this, and it's gone pretty well. So.
Oh, nice. So what exactly was the start though of like teaching Japanese online? Like, did you originally think I might do this on my YouTube channel, and this might be a series that I'll do?
That's another good question. Yeah. So actually, when I was starting out, I don't know, probably about 20 or 30 videos in, one of my videos, someone posted it on Reddit.
Oh, okay.
Like the Learn Japanese forum. They said, this guy deserves more views. He's actually pretty funny. And so...
Big compliment in terms of
I was like, actually pretty funny.
Yes.
So I went over there and I said, because suddenly I had like this huge boost in subscribers. Like I went from like 10 subscribers a week to suddenly like I had like 1,000 additional subscribers overnight, and I was like, what is going on? So I asked on Twitter, like, what happened? Like, where did you guys come from? And they said, someone posted your video on Reddit. So I went over there and I said, I made this video, ask me anything. And they said like, well, how did you study like Japanese? Like your Japanese is quite good, and like I don't see anyone else doing like this kind of thing. Like, do you have any tips? And kind of occurred to me that a lot of people weren't studying phonetics. Like that's something that I had always kind of taken for granted because of the path that I went. But it kind of clicked. It was like, oh yeah, like most people don't study this. And so some people said like, I like your stuff. Like maybe if you made a Patreon, like I'd want to support you. So it was like, okay, again, as an artist, I don't want to just be like, give me money. It's like, okay, if you guys want to support me, this is something that I'm going to make because it was beneficial for me. So for this particular community, it might be good. And I always try and tell people that it's not a must. Like you can definitely have very fluent Japanese, even if your accent is quite bad. And I think there's a lot of people actually that their accent is worse than mine, but they speak much more fluently than me because they don't think about their accent. Whereas me, when I speak, probably because I teach as well, it's like I'm pretty conscious of like the pitch accent of words and stuff like that as I speak. So it kind of slows me down a little bit.
I see. Like you're kind of thinking about like, how do I say this all correctly and nicely? But
yeah, but that's mostly because, again, not because I learned phonetics, but because I teach phonetics. So like on the Patreon series, I always tell people like, try and learn this and get this like ingrained in your bones, but then try and forget it once you actually start speaking. Because if you think too much when you speak, you won't be able to speak. Right. You'll just get stuck like, is this the right pitch accent? Is this have like devoicing on this word? And it'll defeat the whole purpose of being good at speaking a language.
Right. You'll lose your fluency in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah. You just become too, concerned about this and too worried about it. So you don't need to stress about it, but it's nice to learn a few tips about.
Yeah, I always try and tell people like, if your goal is you would like to sound as Japanese as possible, then this would be a good thing to study. But if you just want to be conversationally fluent, it's not something that you need to worry about. Like it's not a must by any means.
Right, that's really good advice. So you're going back to your channel and also Twitter as well. You post your videos on Twitter also. Would you say that your audience is primarily Western, like people who are, interested in like learning Japanese and that's why they kind of jumped on board? Or would you say you're also really like you've attracted an equally large Japanese audience? Like which would you say is a little bit more prominent?
For a long time, it was almost entirely Western. And then I made that Logan Paul video and a lot of Japanese people subscribed all of a sudden.
Oh, okay.
So right now I think the ratio is probably something like 2/3 Western.
I see,
okay. But even among the Japanese audience, I would say a good majority are Japanese people that have experience like living overseas or, like they majored in like English studies or something like that. So a little bit more international Japanese audience.
Right. It's not really just meant for people abroad, but it's kind of a niche audience in a way. People who know a fair bit about Japan and Japanese. And
a lot of that's a good point as well. Like I think that, how should I phrase this? I think the essence of a good joke is something that really resonates really strongly. But the broader the joke is, the less it will be able to hit home strong. So like the strike zone for like all of my jokes is very, very small. Like you have to know Japanese and you have to have experience living in Japan and you have to be kind of like disillusioned with life.
Right, I see.
But like if you're all three of those, then it's like that's the strike zone. Again.
Right. It's actually very specific. There's a really limited kind of group of people who would totally get the joke, but
but for everyone else, it's like, why is this funny?
Right. But still, I think it's a great area to aim for. Like, there's a real audience that really enjoys this type of stuff, like that can fully understand it. I think like bilingual material is also really, it's interesting. Like there are more and more bilinguals every day. So it's something that, I think it's like a growing future for
I think kind of and right now it's like the number of people like getting interested in Japan through like anime or whatever, it's like it's exploding. Like anime, I don't know if we still have time or not.
Getting
maybe I'll kind of like wrap this up, but I think it's quite interesting because like when I started to get into Japanese, like anime was like if you liked anime, like you were a nerd, and like, you know, it's like you weren't cool at all. But I think while some of that stigma is still there, it's like, it's kind of like anime has kind of like become part of like, I hope Joey doesn't get mad at me for saying this, but it's like, it's become, depending on how you look at it, like part of like the hipster community, kind of. Like anime as a whole exists here, and it's like, you're into anime, it like, oh, that's cool, that's a cool thing about you. And that doesn't, I'm not trying to speak down about the quality of anime at all, because anime by itself is just another type of art, and there's amazing anime and not so good anime. But it's certainly, the stigma attached to it has become less strong compared to like what it was, I don't know, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I totally
It's become
agree.
cool to like anime, kind of.
It is, yeah. And it's become, if anything, more normal. Like, not just cool, but like it's been normalized.
Yeah,
like, this
exactly.
is like a common form of entertainment.
Yeah, like cosplay conventions and stuff like that. Like when I was in university, it was like there would be like one or two like on the West Coast, and now there's like tons of cosplay conventions all over the world, and it's like people have just embraced that completely, and good on them for doing that.
Right, yeah, I think so too. Like, I mean, it's great that people can follow their anime passions in a way. Great. Well, this might be a good place to wrap up. I feel like I've gotten to know you quite well, and the audience has as well. So I think this is a side of you that most people really haven't had a chance to see.
I hope you guys learned something.
Yeah, I know. The inside world of Dogen today. Yeah,
hope
really.
you're not too disappointed.
No, if anything, I think like this was just like, you know, this is something that people, I'm sure, we're always curious about, like, you know, who you really are. So hopefully you guys got to experience that today. And I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you. All right, well, thanks for watching, and hope to see you guys again in the next video at Tokyo Creative Talk. This has been your host, Shizuka Anderson, and once again, our lovely guest, Dogen.
See you guys later.
See you guys next time. Bye-bye.